Greetings, owners of fine luxury cardboard rectangles. We are here today to discuss bannings versus restrictions in Magic the Gathering. And the reason that I'm choosing to have this conversation now of all times is because with the situation that's going on with Oko right now, I have never seen this many people bring up the, why can't it just be restricted? Why doesn't Wizards use restrictions? And in the entire time that I've been making videos, I've rarely seen the subject come up at all. But it's come up a ton lately. So I figured it would be a good idea to go ahead and discuss what the difference is between a banning and restriction, why one is used and why the other isn't used, although technically restrictions are still in use in Vintage. They're pretty much an obsoleted way of doing things. They do still have the ban and restricted list, and yes, stuff does change in Vintage, but let's be real, let's be honest. Vintage is one of the least relevant formats in Magic the Gathering, sheerly based on the price and exclusionary nature of that format. Now, if you're someone who likes Vintage, awesome. If that's what you're doing, I'm not knocking your format, but you have to understand, it's not relevant to the majority of players. And every time we get a banned and restricted announcement, people are hearing the concept banned and restricted. So you can understand why I'd be like, well, hold on. They make banned and restricted announcements like every 2 months. Why are we never seeing cards get restricted? And why can't they restrict cards in Standard? So I have a very long view of this, right? I mean, I started playing Magic back in 1994. So I didn't start before they had I didn't start at the point when they had no deck rules in terms of you could play with any number of cards. Because you got to understand, when Richard Garfield originally designed Magic the Gathering, he never expected for people to buy booster box after booster box after booster box. Imagine other games that you play where you just kind of grab a box off the shelf and you're good. Richard Garfield thought that people would buy a starter deck and maybe a couple of boosters. And if you think about that, if you think about a scenario where everybody in your play group had a starter deck and a couple of boosters, do you really need to even intercede in that? Do you need to set up a structure of banned and restricted cards, or say you can only play with 4 of any particular card? Because originally, that's the initial restriction that was put on Magic the Gathering. At the beginning, it was a free-for-all. If you could get 10 copies of a card through trading with your friends, you could play with 10 copies of a card. Cards like Plague Rat, which are the earliest version of something like Persistent Petitioner, or the rats from Dominaria, rat colonies, the ones that grow based on the number you have. Well, Plague Rats was the first one of those. And when Plague Rats was designed, they didn't say on it, you can play any number in your deck, because when the game was invented, you could play any number of anything. Now, due to the explosive popularity of Magic the Gathering, and the fact that it kind of taps into people's gambling and addictive nature, you'll end up cracking a ton of Magic, getting a bunch of it. We all know that. It's more like, oh, let me mainline some of that Magic the Gathering. Is that, I don't know the terminology that the people who do the vein tapping use. So is it mainlining? Am I hip and I'm cool? I'm just a confused old man who wants to talk about cardboard rectangles. So let's stay on target. Okay, so originally, they come along and say, now you can only play with 4 copies of any given card. That was the very, very first restriction ever put on Magic the Gathering. You can only play 4 of any card. But it didn't take too long to realize that that wasn't enough. So then they went, okay, you know what? We need further restrictions. We'll we'll have the overall guideline of you can only play with 4 copies of a card, and then we will restrict cards on top of that. So a card restriction simply means you're only allowed to play 1 copy of a card in any given deck. Whereas a ban is pretty self-evident. It means you can play 0 copies. That card is absolutely not allowed. Now, as I said before, with the whole Oko situation going on, there's a lot of people asking, why can't we restrict cards? And I think if we drill down underneath it, it's not just the Oko ban that's causing calls for this. It's the situation with Fields of the Dead as well, where Fields of the Dead just got banned. So we have 2 major decks that are being played by 40% or more of players based on the statistics. I mean, these are rough averages. Understand, I'm talking about competitive tournament play, not tabletop Magic, because when it comes to tabletop Magic, friend groups will come up with their own rule set, going, no, you can't play with that card anymore. I don't care what the rules say. You can't use it anymore. Put away your idling leprechauns. I'm tired of you making my stuff green. Everyone has their own pet peeve cards. But regardless, I think that the reason we're seeing so much discussion around restrictions is the fact that we're looking at two major bans back to back. Now, at the time I'm making this video, we don't know what's going to happen with the Oko deck, right? If you're watching this video later on and time has passed, then you're probably not living in the exact moment we're living in. But right now, we're living in a post-Field of the Dead ban, but a pre-Oko getting nerfed ban. We've got a ban coming up in a little over 2 weeks. It's pretty much guaranteed we're going to be getting a ban. The question is, are they going to ban Oko, or are they going to ban cards around Oko? Because sometimes Wizards wants to keep cards in the format for a number of reasons. Usually, if I'm honest, I think it's monetary reasons, but either way, we're looking at a situation where they're going to ban Oko or ban cards around him. And banning cards is used in every single format but Vintage. Now, why is this the case? Why does Wizards of the Coast choose to use restrictions in the Vintage format and not in anything else? Well, part of it is I think that the Vintage format would fall apart if they didn't use restrictions. If you didn't get to play, like, the idea of Vintage is you get to play with big, dumb, swingy nonsense. Vintage games can be over like that, where your game, like, we just started, okay, game's over, shuffle up. Like a turn or two. Blisteringly fast games, all kinds of swingy scenarios, and not a lot of stability. And when it comes to bannings over restrictions, bannings offer more stability to a format, less randomness, more reliability. So I'm going to go a little more in depth with like how this all works, because you have to understand that Magic the Gathering is similar to games like chess, but different, and different in glorious ways. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not exactly knocking chess, but personally, I find chess to be boring and very static. Now, yes, if you do get into like super high level play, there can be like he's using the Magushkakov opening, and check it out, he did this first maneuver, which means he's doing this, but is it a fake out and he's really going into this? And you get like high level chess masters where it can get really intense for people who are into chess. And I get that. If you like to spectate chess, you like to play high level chess, I understand. But for me, there's not enough variance in chess. And that's what Magic the Gathering interestingly brings to the table. Through the nature of a randomized set of cards, instead of having the exact same game pieces each game available at the same time, like when you start a game of chess, you have all of your chess pieces available to start with, right? You can choose different moves. You have all these, like, I mean, mathematically, there's a crazy amount of moves when you break down the number of different move pieces you can move on the first turn versus the number of positions they get to. Mathematically, that equals a lot of different opens. But at the same time, they are statically set. You get the exact same pieces at the exact same time every game, and that changes as the game progresses, but it always starts the same. Magic games, even in Standard, where the decks are very similar, you'll have the same kind of cards coming up over and over, you very rarely have the exact same starts when it comes to the first couple moves for a Magic the Gathering game, dependent on the decks and how things are going. There's a lot of variance based on, first of all, deck construction, then the randomization of the shuffling, and other factors like how many lands did you put into your deck? How many lands did you get? Are you getting the right amount of lands to curve out? Did you get the right hand to curve out? Are you a couple turns back because you didn't get enough lands? Or you just got really expensive spells and can't do anything for the first few turns? There's a number of different factors that come together to add a staggering amount of variance to Magic the Gathering, which is something I personally enjoy, even though I share everyone's frustration at either getting mana flooded or mana screwed. Either way, those are feel bad moments, but they're a part of what makes Magic so magical. A certain level of variance is acceptable, but also a certain level of stability is required for reasonable levels of enjoyment and gameplay that feel like you have a chance. In any game of Magic, at the very beginning, there's the potential. If your deck isn't as good as your opponent, you could still win through variance. They can end up getting mana screwed, mana flooded, they might not get the ideal hand, you get the perfect hand. There's a number of these different scenarios that can hand lesser decks and lesser players wins, which in a way tends to even out the playing field to a degree. That's why you'll see that even the highest level players, like when you take the highest level Magic players, they don't have a 100% win rate. They don't have a 90% win rate. You don't see that. Those numbers would be absolutely insane, right? So even the highest level players fall victim to the variance of Magic, which has a way of making it more enjoyable for everyone. So you're looking for a scenario where you have just enough variance without anything that makes it too swingy. And that's part of what breaks down into the concept of banning versus restricting. Now you may think to yourself, what's the big deal about allowing one copy of a busted card to remain in your deck and remain in the format as opposed to 4 copies? Yes, obviously it reduces your chances of drawing that card significantly, but it creates a very undesirable swingy effect to the game. Now, if you played way back in the day, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. All I have to do is mention one card and you'll be like, Sol Ring. First turn, Sol Ring, right? A Sol Ring is a 1 casting cost artifact that taps for 2 colorless mana. So you're already getting ahead by mana on the first turn. You just put it out on the first turn, you pay 1, the Sol Ring comes out untapped, ready to go. Yes, it is colorless generic mana, but it doesn't matter. It means on the second turn, you're at 4 mana. You're essentially on turn 4 if you were laying lands. That level of acceleration is absurd to the point where just like, you're not going to get it every game because you only have 1 in your deck. But oh Lord, the difference that it makes. It turns games into blowouts. Having a first turn Sol Ring is one of the best feelings in the world when you're playing. You're like, oh my God, I'm going to run house on you. That's how it feels. So that's what it turns it more into a game of random chance and adds more of a coin flip feel to games of Magic the Gathering, where you have a scenario where it's like, okay, coin flip. Oh, did I get one copy of my restricted busted card? Well, now I have a mega advantage over you and I'm going to run you into the ground. So you have the swingy nature of it. Also, on top of that, you have to bear in mind that there is a memory and complexity level to it as well. When you just have a banned list, when it comes to a deck, you just go, okay, all I have to do is know what's banned. Now, all I need to do is understand the concept of banned, which is instantly understood. Banning, the word banning is universal, right? Where you go, okay, banning is universal, and I know what it means. It means I cannot use this. Restricted can mean a number of things in different circumstances. But when you hear something's restricted in Magic the Gathering, your brain doesn't instantly go, oh, that means I get to use 1 copy. Like, banning is an instantly understandable concept. Everybody knows what a ban is. Everybody knows how a ban works. Not allowed at all. But a restriction doesn't have that sort of automatic understanding. A restriction means you have to build up your own memory baggage in terms of, okay, a restriction in Magic the Gathering means I can only play 1 copy of this. Now that means that 2 separate lists have to be maintained for every format. You've got your banned list and your restricted list. So you've got 2 problems with it. You've got the complexity issue where you're making it more complex for people. And remember, standard is the entry point for most Magic players. Most Magic players are introduced to Magic through standard. Yes, there are some people who are going to try and argue that, oh, you know, it's tabletop and they get introduced through Commander, because everyone has their own biases. But standard is where Wizards introduces people to the game. The open houses, everything like that, it's all meant to guide people into standard. Arena, again, another place where people are guided into standard. So standard is the first place that people join Magic the Gathering. And Magic the Gathering is a very complex game. Even looking at standard, which admittedly is the smallest and least diverse format there is, it still has a staggering number of pieces. I don't know how many pieces there are off the top of my head when you're playing chess. What do you have, like 10 different pieces? You've got like pawns, bishops, rooks, king and queen, knights. You got like 10 pieces or less, really. That's what it feels like. I could be wrong. Maybe the count's a little off. But you get what I'm saying when you compare the 10, maybe 12 at most pieces that a chessboard has, not in total, I mean different pieces, versus the well over 1,000 cards that will be available in standard. Even when there's only 4 sets in standard, when standard is at its lowest point, there are 4 sets in standard bare minimum. And that equals at least like 1,200 cards, roughly. I'm rounding the numbers just to give you an idea. So think about that. 10 different pieces you have to understand versus a possibility of over 1,000 different pieces you need to understand, plus the banned list. Now you add in the restricted list. There's all kinds of things that new players need to learn on their journey into Magic the Gathering. Restrictions add unnecessary complexity to the game on top of adding that coin flip nature, right? Magic has a certain level of variance, but underneath it all, Magic is a game of skill, right? So you've got a scenario where that whole swingy coin flip nature reduces how much the game feels in terms of skillfulness. And I don't think I worded that perfectly, but I think you get the idea that I'm saying, where overall, the swingy nature of these super powerful cards, when you get them, it relies less on your ability to play skillfully and maximize your resource usage, and instead just rewards you for being a luck sack, right? And there's a certain level of that in Magic already, and that's fine. Again, that's something I like in Magic. But the whole restricted aspect of it just adds to that. If a card is too powerful, it's too powerful. It doesn't mean you should scale down the numbers and sometimes let people have a too powerful card. It still leads to feel bad scenarios. It doesn't add depth to the game really overall. It just adds unnecessary complexity and an unnecessary level of variance. There's already enough variance in Magic. The restricted takes it to too high a level of variance overall. So from my perspective, I actually like that they don't do restrictions and only do bannings. And understand, again, I've been playing Magic for 25 years. I played Magic before there were formats. You know, like when I was playing Magic, it was just Magic the Gathering. Sure, we had the restriction you could only play 4 of any copy, and there was a restricted list, but that was it. Like, there wasn't a standard, there wasn't extended, none of that. I remember when the whole old and new formats came along and they just called them Type 1 and Type 2. That's how old I am. So I'm coming from a long-range perspective. I do genuinely believe that restricting cards is not the answer. It wouldn't lead to a feel-better scenario overall. It's not really the best path. Now, all that being said, I am interested in your opinion on this. Let me know what you guys think about this in the comment section, both because I'm interested in what you have to say and leaving comments actually helps the channel too. So it's a double win. So let me know what you guys think. I appreciate you all coming by. Want to let you know, I also actually have a second channel where I do a lot of silly and fun videos. So if you feel like you want to break from the stress of Magic or the stress of the everyday, you want to have a chuckle and not a kid-friendly chuckle. Bear in mind, the same for your kids. This is not for your kids, son. You can watch this stuff with your kids, but don't bring them over there. They're going to learn a whole different side of the world if you take them over there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to link 2 videos from my other channel here at the end because I'd like you to go on over there. It's a small channel. I'm trying to grow it up, so I need to have more subscribers. I need more watch time, all that good stuff, so that YouTube will recognize it as a channel. Let me get the whole thing monetized so I can get more reach on it and get more people laughing, because at the end of the day, I absolutely love the videos that I'm making over there. They're very funny and they make me happy. So thanks everybody for coming by. I will see you all tomorrow. And remember, together, we are the 6th color of Magic.